you for tuning in. My name is Jocelyn, and this is Tetler. Here we have Nirvana, Dana, and Connor, and a surprise guest. We are going to continue our conversation about language, brain, and culture. Let's dive in. Dana, can you sum up our last episode for the new listeners?
In the last episode, we described language and how it impacts culture. I'm sure you all are familiar with both definitions, but just to summarize, language is the principal method of communication that members of a social group and participants in its culture express themselves. This includes speech, gestures, and writing. Culture is the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of racial, religious, or social group. This communication helps to build strong relations, and as people with different cultures connect, one of the hardest barriers they face is language. Jocelyn describes hegemony and the role America has in the westernization of other countries. She also mentioned how westernization from the British and India has affected the whole Indian country's cultural and religious beliefs. Connor then explained how hegemony greatly influences other cultures that surround it. We each spoke about how values, culture, logic, and technology impacts knowledge. In this episode, we will go more in depth with real-world examples of how language affects your brain and culture, specifically English and Arabic.
To expand what I mentioned in the last episode, the English language seems to have a great hegemony around the world, especially the United States. With the influence of westernization, which I would like to give more examples of, to further prove the point that westernization shouldn't be enforced, especially with foreign countries that hold their cultural values. For instance, in Arabic-speaking countries, those worry that westernization might diminish their religious values. This is troublesome because their religion is the main source of influence of their culture. With westernization, messing with it will cause a loss in their culture. So the argument that westernization is good for countries to follow, since it will grant a great functioning country, is false because some countries need to withhold their culture, which defines them.
And relating back to Jocelyn's point, for this particular section, I'll be talking about the hegemony of the United States, due to them having the highest concentration of English-speaking people, or the highest population of English-speaking people currently in the world. The economy of the hegemony also affects the culture as well. The economy of the United States has put the country on a significant pedestal in the global arena, and it has both the highest nominal GDP as well as the highest net worth worldwide, with the next country below it having almost $40 trillion less than the United States in total net worth. The major industries of the United States can range from lumber to a number of topics like aerospace, or oil exports, and other topics as well. Prior to the United States becoming a large influence in the world sphere, their culture was primarily influenced by European culture and the practices in that region, and this was especially marked by their following of the British culture to an extent, due to the fact that the United States was once a colony of the British, but they adopted mainly the ideals of the Enlightenment, along with some of the ideals of the British culture at the time. However, the revolutionary background of the United States greatly influenced the United States, as it provided an individualistic nature that much of the United States now has today. And at this point in time, it wasn't exactly a greatly well-known superpower that exported their culture more than anything else. But in the early 20th century, the United States had probably the largest economy in the world at the time, and it was sort of an unofficial global superpower with, having the largest economy among other industries that it was leading. But the culture around it really changed in the mid 20th century, in the aftermath of World War II, in which many of the European countries that were vying for power on the global stage had to focus their efforts into rebuilding their country, along with some of the other countries in Asia that also had to rebuild due to the effects of World War II. And the U.S. was sort of alone in this, as they previously had the economy as well as the size to back up their now official superpower status. And after this point, it created a culture of consumerism, which grew greatly and even expanded to now encompassing a lot of the worldwide cultures that you see today, where many of the people value consumer items more than most other things that they have or spiritually have. And this causes a sort of rift between the English culture and the Arabic culture, which I will go on to later on.
Briefly speaking upon the way values shape society is categorize how someone should or should not behave. Human value systems are intertwined with the teaching and experiences of their own or specific culture. This may lead to different understanding of things to occur when exposed to new cultures. For instance, exposing someone to new culture can alter what is good and bad, unjust and just, based on that person's knowledge. Not to mention, values can be seen as something significant since it is considered a key component in strategic planning. It also helps guide people, actions, and priorities within the society or an organization.
Some proud Americans like to tell other people to speak English because they are in America. Obviously, this doesn't make any sense since there are a plethora of polyglots in the country. What these people don't understand, though, is that a person who speaks multiple languages, including English and Arabic, has much better brain power. Their ability to speak more than one language causes their memory, problem-solving, and critical thinking skills to improve, as well as their ability to concentrate, multitask, and listen. Most parents of bilingual children push for their child to speak their native language around them and the language they are expected to speak outdoors. This helps to preserve their language and prevent them from forgetting who they are and where they come from. The cognitive and social benefits of speaking English and Arabic have the same effects as speaking any other two languages. However, teaching children to speak more than their native language can prevent biases towards it. There are many different ways in which language increases brain power, and it varies on where and how an individual was raised. For example, people who speak certain Australian languages are better at orienting themselves in space than people who speak English, since they can always tell north from south even during the night.
Yeah, Dana, I agree with what you said with increasing your brain power, especially when you're learning a native language, which also connects what I'm about to say, where learning these native languages also affects your thinking, since it's connected to your culture. For instance, from Arabic countries, they tend to think more religiously since their religion, Islam, and it's a big influence. Most Arabs have the belief that life circumstances are controlled and planned from God, which can heavily influence their thinking on certain situations. On the other hand, those who speak English tend to think more scientifically or even religiously with the influence of Christianity.
Arabic being the fourth spoken language in the world, one advantage of Eastern language is grasping the richness and diversity of Arab culture throughout literature and films, and even more. This shows that Eastern languages may help interact with society while developing an objective understanding. In other words, it may strengthen someone's communication skills. Another advantage of Eastern language is that it challenges the brain. As mentioned before, based on a study conducted in Israel at a University of Haifa, reading Arabic is so very complicated for the right side of the brain, and therefore it leaves all the job to the left side. Western language focuses on the cause of a certain group rather than the morals and beliefs of that language. As languages advance, there are different dialects, meaning they become difficult to understand and learn. Mastering Eastern languages is commonly found difficult and a challenging task. Jocelyn, can you explain more about the Western European language and its advantages and disadvantages?
Western European languages tend to have the English language, which is like one of the dominant languages. And an advantage of learning these Western European languages is that they consist of scientific ideologies that might grasp those who think that way as well. But they also have their disadvantages, which is the suppression of other country languages and religious values. In history, those who spoke the languages suppressed other countries' religious belief. For instance, in France, they are planning to create a ban on hijabs, which is an importance in Islam. Western Europe tends to have a deep-rooted history with racism and colonization.
I believe Connor wanted to talk about the religion.
In the United States, particularly, to go back to, I think it was Jocelyn's point, the importance of Christianity in the United States, specifically at least, especially in places like the regional South, where a large percentage of the population identifies as Christian. This often influences the political landscape as well as the social landscape as well of this particular region in the United States, and religion often has a really large influence overall in just the general scope of how things play out in the world globally. I just wanted to add that point on.
Okay, with that being said, we have a special guest. She was a part of our other series that we have about police brutality. Her name is Rafia. Rafia, you want to put your input in this?
So, my name is Rafia, and I just wanted to talk about how language can be such a generalized and unique thing that based on your region and environment, it can be very influential or detrimental. For example, if I'm in Queens, I have a different slang than the one in Brooklyn or the one in Bronx. So I feel like whatever environment that you're in also influences your language. And going off of Arabic, there are different dialects of Arabic. For example, in Egypt, they might speak a different type of Arabic because of the Egyptian environment, while in Saudi Arabia, it's more formal and more like stricter Arabic. So I feel like the different regions, the environments plays an impact in language, and language itself can be very influential.
That was good. Thank you.
Okay, to wrap up, ultimately, these examples and information help outline the connection between language, culture, and brain structure. By doing so, it helped understand how it can have a negative or positive impact towards each other.
Please check out our other social media, such as our Podbean page with Techport as the name, all lowercase. There it's Techport 103 or 103, I believe, is the name on Podbean, as well as our YouTube page, which is just Techport, capital T, lowercase ECH, capital P, lowercase ORT. And thank you for listening.